Good afternoon and welcome to Coffee, Tech, and Opportunity. I'm Will McNeil, CEO and founder of Black Tech Jobs, and your host today. We're super excited to have Ryan Neal, President and CEO of Blueprint Technologies, join us and engage us in a real conversation about today's marketplace as it relates to employment, the job marketplace, to be more specific, and what you can do to balance. These are challenging times. These are very, very interesting times. And we want to be able to help deliver some value to our community of both employers and candidates to make sure that we are living up to our promises. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Ryan Neal so he can tell you a little bit about himself and his great story, his origin story, and how he's done so much in technology. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Hey, glad that you're here. I started talking a bit about your background and experience. Going to be more excited to have you on. And I'd like to just kick it off a bit with your origin story. You have a very diverse career. Your first business was in the trades, right? So, and now you're in technology. Siding and windows, doors, does that sound right?
Yeah. Window and door manufacturing.
Wow. That is quite the transformation from the work that you're doing today.
Yeah, it's I would say like I don't have any business being in the business that I'm in that we have a tech consulting company, and I hate technology and I hate consultants. So it's a little bit ironic, which makes us do it a different way. So kind of my background is, I was my inspiration for kind of everything I do is from my mom. She was a single mom. My parents were divorced when I was 4. So she was a single mom when with 4 kids, no education, no job, all of a sudden having to make it work. And so I kind of grew up watching her raise us, but then work multiple jobs in the evening. And she eventually started her own business and eventually became a serial entrepreneur that I ended up kind of working in those businesses along the way, which was pretty amazing to watch. It kind of showed me the power of no matter where you come from or what you're starting with, what you can create within the America, right? The United States, the opportunity that's there. And then how I got into business was I ended up going in the music industry because I'm a musician and wanting to be a CEO of a record label and jumping into law school and getting my MBA at the same time and working for the record label during the day. And then eventually getting out and also struggling to not being able to find a job post law school and with an MBA, so highly qualified and not have any job prospects. And eventually through a number of different connections, bought my first company, and then kind of went on from there, being able to buy multiple different companies and startup companies and things like that. And they, like, one of the big things that we've learned kind of along the way is, all the different folks that have been around in my journey have all been from very different walks of life. And that's kind of the theme of what we try to espouse now from a diversity of thought perspective. Is the only way you can really kind of get some of that stuff done is through diversity of thought. And so, yeah, my first company was a custom window and door manufacturing company, and then also started, that was right in the middle of the kind of pre-Great Recession, and started my first tech consulting company with a few friends, and I never really understood it, the business, until after we sold it and we kind of flipped it and created a Blueprint to kind of flip the model on its head, where we stripped out the consulting part of it and stripped out kind of the more base level tech work, and wanted to marry the strategy and delivery into something that's really provides business value. And it's been a great ride. We're just about to hit our 12-year mark in business. So over a decade's pretty rare from a company age standpoint. So we're pretty proud of that. And we've gone through multiple different iterations, and we kind of pride ourselves on reorging every single year, repointing in a different direction, because the world changes constantly, especially when you're kind of out in front of all the different tech.
Yeah, it's a great segue. The world is changing a lot, and especially in technology, specifically around technology employment. Let's talk a little bit about the job market and what's going on. What do you think is going on? Before you answer, I'll preface kind of the backdrop of why I'm asking this question is we're talking to a lot of people who have been laid off over the last 24 months. I've talked to a number of highly skilled, highly educated, well experienced professionals who've been out of work for over a year. And in 2023, there hasn't been much reporting at scale on this topic. But the first half of the year, 90% of the people who were laid off were of African American descent.
Yep.
So, what's your take on what's happening to the job market, and what have you learned? And then we'll come back to the kind of the final part of my question, which is, what general advice would you give to active job seekers?
Yeah, that's great. It's a great question. And to kind of frame the thought process around what's going on is, we yeah, Will's absolutely. You're amazing at the data portion of it, and also the lack of data that's out there. Being able to analyze what's being reported and what's actually not being reported. We very much, we work with a lot of the major enterprises around the United States primarily. So we're primarily US based, we're primarily US company based. And what we've seen is the same thing as happening that you're putting out there as far as the data is concerned, and that about 4 or 5 years ago there was this big surge of hiring by all the major companies in the United States because of low interest rates and basically free capital, and everybody trying to do kind of a talent grab. So a ton of hiring in all the different kind of initiatives around companies. Well, about 2 years ago, everything kind of put the brakes on when the interest rates started rising, and then all the especially the publicly traded companies, but even tech startups that are VC funded and private equity backed companies, all of a sudden they have to be putting cuts in place and being able to skinny down their operations to try to show profitability, just because simple fact of cost of capital, right? And what that ends up impacting is all of a sudden kind of like almost a last in, first out perspective of anybody that was hired recently is usually first on the chopping block from a layoff standpoint. And so that's put a lot of pressure on a lot of different groups that had maybe gotten opportunities or had earned their way in, but they didn't necessarily have kind of the steeped in track record or tenure that a lot of other folks have, right? So what's ended up being resulted in is a completely disparate type of impact on the job market, but nobody's really talking about it and nobody's really reporting on it.
Yeah. These are challenging times. Let's talk a little bit about, and so before I want to just talk to the audience too, please shout out your location. A couple of things I'm going to ask that you do. I'm going to put this in the chat if you can see it. And then I'm also going to just highlight a couple of banners here for folks to shout out some things, because we're not just here to engage in a conversation and give advice. Both things are important, but we also want to help connect people to opportunity and connect employers to would-be job seekers, with the highly skilled market of people that we most frequently engage with. And so I'm going to start with, if you're hiring, please post in the chat, just type in hiring so that other people who are actively looking can connect with you. And so I've invited a number of talent acquisition folks to join us from all across the country, from coast to coast, across the Midwest, and especially in the major markets. And if you're actively looking, I'm going to ask that you do this. Just type OTW, open to work, and just plug that there so the people who are hiring can connect with you, and that we can connect with you as well. And then one last thing that I'm going to ask is that if you are looking for a new role, and I'll leave this up for a little bit, and I'll also put this link in the chat a little later, to build a profile because we want to talk about next is our partnership, the Black Tech Jobs and Blueprint Technologies partnership, and what we're doing together to galvanize opportunity for many of the people who've been displaced, or many of the people, quite frankly, who I've talked to or exchanged messages with, who are in fear of being displaced. Because some folks are working today in an environment where they've seen the second or third rounds of layoffs, and they're asking themselves, is this, I've dodged the first series of layoffs. Am I going to make it through the fourth set? And this is where kind of tenure, relationships, what project assignment you have right now can play a big part in your ability to hold your place within a company. And it's amazing the way the discussions go down on who gets to stay and who unfortunately doesn't get to stay. But if you're also trying to grow your career and you're looking for another avenue, as we discuss this partnership, I think it'll be helpful too. And let's just get to it. We've been talking for some time about this idea, Ryan, you and I, and the idea of us working together to drive more access to opportunity in a time where employers are getting leaner, but many of them still have projects they need to complete. So you have the project getting leaner, some need employers, and then we have mixing that with this kind of elasticity that's happening, the squeezing and pulling of the need for talent. And so the solution that we were discussing was kind of contract work. And let's talk a little bit about that. There's a few label staffing augmentation. There's other words to describe it. What is it? Why is it helpful for people who would be looking for jobs? And why is it helpful for the employers?
Yeah, it's great. And to cover off just for everybody, like everybody that's watching the confusion and the fear and all those things going on in the market, it's a real thing. I mean, to give you a little bit of a perspective is, and it's not stopping anytime soon, which is why this initiative that we're working on is so important and so timely. And we've been working on it for a long time. We actually have gotten what Microsoft is one of our large clients. And one of the big things that they're doing right now is they're starting to work on budget cuts, right? So it's still working on budget cuts, and it's all headcount, right? On the FTE side as well as the contractor side, and it's this kind of weird. You sit there and take a look at it and go, wow, that like it's an incredibly profitable company, or somewhat like supposedly profitable company with a lot of money, and they're still doing the budget cuts across the board, right? And so that's a high level of like anxiety if you're in either role, going, geez, am I going to be affected or not? And then if you look at the landscape that's out there, you have a tough time going through the process of submitting your resumes in on your own and trying to go through the interview process on your own. So that's why we've been working on this joint venture, based on first and foremost based on a shared belief around diversity of thought and the power of it, right? That belief system that if you believe in the cause and if you believe in the effort, it doesn't matter where you come from, what your background is. It's very important to everybody. And one of the big barriers for anybody that doesn't have a network, or especially if you're from an underserved community, is the ability to plug into existing opportunities and kind of be a known quantity, or be kind of a quantity that a company can take a risk on or make a bet on. And so one of the things that we've done kind of core to our joint venture is to say, well, you know what, we're going to put our money where our mouth is, and you can actually do a different way of engaging with this talent that's out there in the market with a very low risk, but have the ability to actually get the benefit and have it make a big impact on your company. And it's in terms of things like contingent staffing, contract to hire, staffing force multiplier, staff augmentation, where usually in the industry, when the FTE roles start getting shed at different companies, like Will mentioned, the work still has to get done, right? All the work has to get done, so that they're usually also shifting their budget over towards contingent staffing or vendors to be able to do the work also because the vendors can actually do it. They're usually more specialty skilled, and they usually don't have the burden of the organizational burden of all the different crazy meetings and different events and activities that the full-time employees have to do. So the vendor and the contingent staffing can usually be way more effective, but also they can learn and they can actually accelerate up in their skill set. And then if the employer has the ability to potentially convert them, then they have the ability to go over and work as an FTE. So that's kind of what we're trying to focus on. That's our model, and why we think it's going to be really, really effective and impactful in this type of a climate.
Yeah, yeah. I like the idea of the upskilling. I'm going to dive into that a little more because taking on a new role, very often where you work, where you're assigned, and the projects you're assigned to have a huge impact on your skill set,
Yeah.
on what you're doing the most, what you're developing in. Talk about some of the advantages of doing a series of contract roles and what that might mean for skill set development as you may shift from project to project.
Yeah, I'll talk about a little bit the misconception about contract work, but then also the importance of contingent staffing. So the misconception about contract work, and it depends on the business model, but at least the one that we espouse and the one that we operationalize is we have vendor roles with companies, but what we try to do is try to marry up the roles with any kind of an end of contract and be able to shift the skill set of the individual over to different projects and different companies, so that over the course of a 2-3 year period, you end up working on 3, 4, 5 different type of engagements with customers. Instead of thinking of it in terms of, I have a finite contract that's only going to be 9 months with a start and an end date. At the end of the 9 months, I'm going to be unemployed, so I have to go back in the search again. So that's kind of the misconception about the contract work that we don't follow. But the important part is, like right now, like the ability to actually upskill, especially on the job. If you go into a full-time employment with any kind of company, you're usually, especially in tech, you're going to be assigned to a particular product or a particular project or a particular group. And what they're going to expect from you is for 2 to 4 to 5 years, you're going to get really, really good at that one thing. Well, what that ends up doing is it narrows your skill set and it narrows your set of experience, so that you end up kind of being branded as you're that type of you are that person, right, that does that work. The ability to, like with contingent staffing, is you can work on multiple different projects, develop multiple skills at the same time, and come out 2, 3, 4, 5 years afterwards with a probably 10x type of set of skills that you can apply to your career, which just accelerates everything within your ability to do what you want to do.
Got it. And I'm going to do a little interruption just for a little bit. I just plugged into the chat the link to build your profile on Black Tech Jobs, and if for some reason it didn't come through because there had been a couple of technical issues across the different platforms. So if you're on LinkedIn, you may not be able to see it. We'll post it as a link to this invite so that you can come back and do that. But it's just Black Tech Jobs /profiles / sign up. So as we were talking about the advantages and learning the skills, this is a very interesting time from a skill acquisition perspective. Some of the things that I've been talking to people about is, hey, Will, I've been in the game for a decade.
Yep.
And I need to stay relevant. What are some of the things that I should be working on? Because 20 years ago, there were like 3 or 4 things you could learn how to do, and you would pretty much be guaranteed employment for life.
Yeah.
But now, new tech is coming out, even within the ecosystems of different buckets of tech. It's growing and expanding, but then we're also seeing a little contraction that I think will accelerate as AI is involved. Because now, just 4 years ago, software engineering was just flooding the marketplace, the demand for it. And now we're seeing that writing code is looking different and is going to continue to change. What are your thoughts about new skill acquiring? So what are some of the things that I should focus on if I'm someone who's been around for a decade and I've gotten really good at front-end development or back-end development? And I've gone deep in one platform or another. So if I'm really good with the Microsoft suite, or if I'm good and other in the Google suite, or on the data side with AWS, what are your thoughts about where and what people should focus in on now?
Well, it's cool. I mean, I have this discussion with my mom all the time that she's like, I can't believe you guys are even going to live in this world, because like all of a sudden Siri wants to talk to me and all these different things. This AI wants to engage with me, and I gotta just go like, it's going to be okay, mom. It's going to be all right. The reality when it comes to kind of that mid generation, especially especially the folks that are coming out of college that were impacted in their education process by the pandemic, is, I think, like exactly how you described it, Will, is it is a massive advantage. And it's a massive advantage if you take a look at it from a non-linear perspective. And that, like, so Will, like, being a professional in this industry, what, like, if somebody wants to be qualified for a software engineering job to work at an enterprise company, what would they typically have? What would their resume have to look like?
Yeah, you're talking about someone who's got, if they're most likely you want to be full stack, so you can be front and back,
Yeah.
right? And you want to have some development examples. You want to be able to hopefully either college educated,
Yep.
and or some series of certifications and some good relationships to go along with those certifications, because not all managers see certifications the same way. And more importantly, they don't just care about what you know about what you do, being prepared to take on the technical part of the interview process.
Yep.
And on that resume, you want to see experience, what you build, the problems you've solved, and the consistency within your employment.
And so, like 5 years ago, like what your resume had to look like. We've gone through this so many times with emerging technology. Is we'll get hit up by an employer and they'll say, "Well, I expect our candidates that you put in front of me to have a PhD in computer science, and they need to have 5 to 7 years experience working with this technology and at the enterprise level." And we usually go like, you realize the technology that you want them to work on didn't exist 5 years ago. It was like, it's 2 3 years old. Like they can't have 5 to 7 years of experience with it. So that's kind of the cool part about it, is where the technology is moving, is that whole paradigm's gone. It's gone. It's working its way out, right? It still is part of the mentality of a lot of the hiring folks and the HR folks, because they're still writing, job descriptions that have a 5 to 7 year set of experience, and mostly because the experience really is what matters, not the degree and not the certifications, right? But the cool part about, especially anybody that is moving into a different area, especially if they're either moving laterally or if they're trying to move up, is in today's day and age, you can get highly skilled really, really quickly, as long as you have a really good LQ. And then the biggest part is you just need to be able to get kind of hands-on experience. So that's what we love about the kind of, we talk about being, if you are kind of 12, 24, 36 months ahead of the tech, or if you're even kind of in like playing with and experimenting with the relevant tech today, that tech's going to be obsolete in 12, 24, 36 months. So the important part is really just making sure that you are up to speed and working with and trying out and playing with and engaging with the communities around this different technology, right? Like here locally in the Seattle area, that's where our headquarters is, we have a great set of like different developer communities that are all like working with a lot of the different things. So engaging with the communities and trying it out, working with it, is really more important than having that kind of pedigree at this point, which is awesome. I love it. It's kind of flipped the whole industry on its head.
Wow. Yeah. Do you go back? You talked about LQ, for those who are of us who are in the part of the uninformed. What's LQ? What does that mean, and why is it important?
Yeah, sorry, I threw
It's all good.
threw out the acronyms. Yeah, so typically, like people would interview for a couple different types of skills, right? We do core values hiring first and foremost, but also then you have the kind of the standard IQ and EQ, right? Where you're going to hire for the intellectual quotient and then also the emotional quotient, right? To say, well, do you have the capabilities to do your job, but then also can you fit in with our team, right? And um, we see those as almost like institutionalized barriers for people that have diverse backgrounds to get into a culture. So to get into a company in that or kind of how it creates a homogenized culture because the I think this person would be a good fit for our team is kind of a representation to say, well, I could like them and I could see myself hanging out with them because they have commonalities and symmetry with me as an individual, or they are smart because they went to this school, right? They have this degree from this university. So do I. So I can validate that they have the IQ that would fit for our company. And the biggest thing is that the homogenization of that hiring practice is archaic. It actually builds in systemic disparities for underserved communities because people that come from different backgrounds oftentimes look, act, speak, think differently than what the rest of the culture does. And so it ends up being kind of they're not really a good fit. They wouldn't fit, right? So we actually kind of flip it around and we treat it more of the learning quotient. Regardless of, we evaluate people regardless of whether or not they have the IQ. They have to kind of meet the basic standards, right, to be able to have the capabilities to do the role. And we just kind of, you can't be a jerk, right? Or you can be a jerk, but not one that people don't really like. But the big thing is you really have to have the learning quotient and be able to get up to speed because anybody that says they're an expert in technology is going to be obsolete real quick unless they're going to be working on some legacy tech. And so, you really have to be super passionate about the next set of technology that's coming out, super passionate about meeting the next individual, super passionate about connecting with the next individual. And that's all the learning quotient that we try to profile for.
That's great. I want to, I've got one last question before I turn it over to our live stream audience. So I am going to ask that we start now. We like to have our live stream audience get them some of their questions answered too. So it's just isn't a show where we're just talking, and we live stream on purpose so we can have this interaction. So please, just if you're on LinkedIn, if you're on X, if you're on YouTube, just chat your question. We'll bring it on stage for Ryan to answer. We may go over a little today, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So if you miss the answers, you can watch the replay, which will be available on all of those platforms. And we will also be sending it out in our newsletter as well.
Also, Will and I talk all the time, so we want to hear from you. So also, if you have perspective, share the perspective, not just the question, right? Because the perspective is the important part.
Love it. Love it. I concur. I was excited to talk about, our conversation and shifting gears a little more detail about the new company that you and I are working on together that combines kind of the strengths of both of our businesses. Us primarily focused on full-time placement, mid-career, senior level Black tech professionals, and your business that is a blend of technical of ISP, of actually completing projects as well and building things, as well as putting people into contract roles. Tell the people, what are we doing here? What's the name of the company, and what problems are we trying to solve?
Yeah, so the joint venture. So we've not just established a partnership, but we've actually established a formal joint venture. It's called New Tech LLC. And so what we're going out we want to really make an impact on this issue in the kind of the arena that we're in. But even before all this nonsense started kind of this talk rhetoric has already started. We've been working on this for a long time because the issue is very real, and it's very systemic, right? About the underrepresentation and the lack of opportunity for people of underserved communities all the way across the board, right? And we're really passionate about it. Backwards and forwards. And so what we've analyzed and the business model that we've created is a staffing force multiplier for companies to be able to make an actual real impact on their DE&I initiatives, not just on paper, not just on a tick in a box, which we're seeing a lot of companies that have actually started to, with a swath, like get rid of all their D&I initiatives that were kind of that were sitting out there, like of their teams. But the reason why they're getting rid of them is because they weren't really empowered to begin with. They were very good people that are really passionate about the cause, but they were put in roles where they didn't have a decision-making ability to be actually change the organization and make an impact on the cause that they're really passionate about. So for us, we're going to market with a contingent staffing model, contract to hire, so that companies can actually not just be able to actually get available talent, but we have a model where we're building it in to be able to upskill and train and get folks certified and get those qualifications that they may or may not have, either because they're either, like, depending on what their background or skill set is, where they're at in their career, for whatever reason, have the ability to actually get upskilled into having a resume that would be able to come through the system and be able to have us be able to place them in roles within companies on a contract basis, so that they can have kind of a team around them to be able to have, be able to give them the best chance of being successful. But then also the employer has the ability to actually view and see that work with the individual and go, this person's awesome, this person's great, this person's really, really effective, regardless of what the resume said through the interview process. When they get actually in to do the work, they're actually really, really good at it, and then have the ability to actually convert those folks over to full-time employees. So those people get into positions of influence and be able to kind of repeat the cycle. So that's kind of our vision for what we want to be able to do. That's our model. That's what we're doing. And it's been really well received so far. I'm super happy about it.
Yeah, same. And I want to just point out a couple of things. So to your comments on the DEIB leadership, is just, I think we were talking about the decision-making authority, having the ability to say yes or no. And just the structure of that system didn't execute well against what I think the audiences, and an audience meaning people who are in the recruiting business, people who are talent acquisition leaders, people who were looking for roles, the execution didn't come through there. And so I think today, our direct approach of connecting people to opportunity in a frictionless way, focused on outcomes and deliverables with a business insight being the leading theme of this, because we're in the business of helping people solve business problems and connecting people to opportunity. And those two things in this joint venture come together very well, kind of like good coffee and a good coffee cup. Even if you spill it, it's still good if you get too much. So, and that's for my coffee drinkers, because that's why we call this show Coffee, Tech, and Opportunity, even though I'm one of those people that still drink tea and doesn't consume coffee. But I never allow what's important to me to influence what's important to the majority of the folks that we're trying to serve. I didn't see any questions come through. I'm still looking. I think I got one here. Here's one.
Real quickly, as they're coming in, I also want to touch on one other cool thing that you espouse really well, and that we talk about quite a bit, is the economic climate right now is really, really wonky. It's really across the world, and for whatever you believe politically or religiously or whatever, it doesn't matter. It is going to get wonkier over the next 4 years. Which just means it's going to have a lot of volatility. And in those times of volatility, companies have to be innovative. They have to modernize and progress and be innovative in order to be able to stay relevant and out in front. And the interesting thing that if you take a look across the board about different companies and whether or not they have the ability to actually fulfill their mission is if they have a diverse culture and a set of diverse thinkers in their leadership team all the way down to the base level. The more homogenized they are, the more they're going to stay the course and not actually think differently about what their company is doing. And so that's also kind of one of the value propositions that we're going to market with is, we have the ability to actually bring people that are really effective at what they do into roles of influence and roles of authority so that they can actually impact the actual diversity of thought in a company and help drive innovation to be able to think differently about the business, which is really, really important in this type of a climate, which that's why we're super passionate about it. And we think the timing is really, really right, really spot on for this joint venture.
Yeah. And we got a couple questions that have come in. And if I mispronounce this, I'm going to apologize, but I'm going to try real hard. Rahib, I am going to answer your question first. Then we're going to go to Heather. I'm going to show so that everyone can see the question. The question is, how can companies include more inclusive hiring practices? And I'm going to start in response to this. One, I think the whole purpose really when we launched Black Tech Job was to drive the mix of people that drive business and decision-making in technology. And I think the challenge has been the biggest investment in the underserved communities have been in young people and children. And where the greatest real need is in adults and the force multipliers. So people who show up, deliver value on day one without a training program, who either are or become managers, directors, vice presidents, CIOs, and CTOs. And then those people are empowered to make hiring decisions and influence business operations from their various perspectives of business and experience and culture and insight. And so I think if you only staff your team with your buddies, your cousins, your neighbors, your friends, eventually you'll get what I call, and feel free to use this, but always, quote it for me, what we call the family feud effect. Ryan and I have talked about this. And that's when someone presents an answer that isn't a great answer. But everyone looks at each other and smiles and says, good answer, good answer, good answer, good answer. And there are many, 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 if you look at the last 5 years technology of consumer-based products that have gone to the market that have been less than successful and not purchased at scale at all and probably gone away, and most people wouldn't remember the name of it if you mentioned it, that's a product of that. And the way you get real good answers from real good ideas is people who are able, that everyone at the table is allowed to share their ideas. But that doesn't happen if we exclusively focused on the early career stuff. And my last quote on that, because I've kind of dominated this question, and then we'll go to Heather's question, is, and we'll let Ryan answer it, is if you show me a child that needs a program, I'll show you an adult that needs a better job. And that's a problem that we're solving for. And when we talk about force multiplicity, that's what we're talking about, both in communities and in companies. Okay, well, I'm going to go to Heather now. Heather, thank you for your question. And her question is, what are some emerging trends in tech that job seekers should be aware of?
Yeah, that's awesome. It kind of harkens back especially for the job seekers, right? I know like a lot of our highly tech folk would talk about some of the more complicated tech, but one of the biggest things that we talk about from a job seeker, and especially not just if you're a job seeker, but also if you are like 2 years into your existing gig and you're feeling that pressure of you just saw a layoff happen, you survived, but when you walk into the conference room in a meeting with your team, you're looking around going, ooh, geez, am I the one that would be on the next set of layoffs, right? That's as much pressure as if you're sitting on the sideline getting unemployment, right? The biggest set of emerging tech is all of this technology that's coming out and removing the barriers for you having to have that degree or that skill, right? It talks about also the next question is, about the university degree. It's kind of the same answer in that yes, education is important. Yes, college is important. I get it. Like there's a lot of people that talk about how a college degree doesn't get you anything, right? And yes, it doesn't get you anything. Nobody's entitled to anything in this culture, in this country. But like what it does is it really helps you develop your LQ, your learning quotient. And what's cool about all the emerging technology around the co-pilots and all these AI assistants is, where if you want to be a graphic designer, you used to have to get really, really good at using a tool like Photoshop, right? Or any of the Adobe suite of products, which there's 50 or whatever, like crazy, right?
A lot.
Yeah. So now you don't have to, right? It's removed all the barriers for you to have to get highly skilled on one particular tool. And the cool part is then you can actually go into graphic design just by using AI-based technology, but it doesn't pigeonhole you into the person who's really good at Photoshop. So it allows you a lot of flexibility to get that skill, but then you can also upskill in a lot of different areas and really diversify your career rapidly and get those skills, the ability to produce, whereas somebody would have to have a track record of 5-10 years ago of that particular skill or that particular tool set.
And I'm going to say one thing about Heather's point, then we're going to switch to Scott, which you talked a little bit about his question, and that is artificial intelligence is such a key piece, and it's a big word. And so specifically, with AI, I would recommend developing some AI prompting skills. So either take a certification course, a structured course where there's some other human interaction. It could be video based or any of those things where you're tested, where you are practicing how to structure conversations, present data, sequencing data in a way that will allow you to get better responses that will help you in your role. So even if you're a talent acquisition professional, if you are a creative, if you are a coder, build that skill set. Because when you're talking about force multipliers, AI is also a force multiplier for employers and for workers. And so I would tell you there's, as someone who grew up in a manufacturing town, and I've watched robotics change the way and the landscape of it, and the people who thrived and survived in that space, when the robots came, they learned to work on the robots. And so I would absolutely say invest in your skills and do it often, because AI is evolving too. It isn't just standing still. And so there'll be a lot of talk about it. But if you can get ahead of it, I equate today's time with artificial intelligence to the early 2000s when the tech bubble went before the boom. And I think we will still see a cycle where there's likely to be a little bit of a bubble because it won't happen fast enough. But then when it recovers from that, it will be really, really fast. And so companies will try to figure out ways to augment labor, to improve efficiency, because there isn't a lot of product innovation that's game changing right now. And so you'll see financial engineering coming first, which has already happened with layoffs and price increases, but the market can only bear so much of both of those things. But I do want to get to Scott's question, who's next, and then we have two more coming up. And I don't want to let everyone know that we're going to get to them. And Maynard, I think, is after that, and then Maynard's the last question so far. So Scott's question: if I don't have a university degree, will it make it difficult for me to break into tech? And let's talk about the non-traditional, because a lot of people are career pivoting into technology. And this is another example of adults. And this is where I think the contractor model really works for these types of candidates as well. And I'm going to shift and let, because I'm not a guest on this show. I want Ryan to answer this question. Ryan, what are your thoughts on Scott's question?
Yeah, and real quick, just to go back to the AI skill set aspect. I don't know if one of our folks in talent acquisition, Greta, has a specialty in the teaching people how to utilize AI really well. So if Greta's on, you should probably just post a few different things in the chat so people have resources, and then definitely be able to connect up with our talent acquisition team to be able to get access to a lot of those resources. the university degree question is an interesting one, in that there's two sides to look at it, and I kind of look at it from both sides. In that, if you are well, first and foremost, track record and experience win the day in tech. If you can do the job, if you can do the role, if you have track record and performance, it doesn't really matter what your resume looks like. Okay, so that's first and foremost. The problem is somebody has to know you in order to know that you have a track record and have the ability to do the work, right? They either had to work with you in the past, or you had to come out of the same community as them, or go to school with them, or whatever. So that kind of limits your opportunities, or kind of limits your way of being able to find a career path. So otherwise, like the university degree is usually it's a kind of table stakes for a resume. Usually that university degree is going to be table stakes for any typical job description. So I don't know, Will, if you have a different opinion on this, but usually the kind of that university degree, regardless of where it comes from, it doesn't really matter where it comes from, as long as you tick the box that you went to college and you got a university degree, it's usually kind of the starting point of a resume. If you don't, especially if you don't have that experience. If you have all that experience, they read the experience, top 1, top 2, top 3, and they don't even get down to where you actually went to school, or even if you went to school, right?
Yeah. So I think, for Scott's question too, it's a common one that comes up. And even there were a number of big tech companies who said, hey, you don't have to have a college degree. So I could rattle off the names of all the billionaires who didn't graduate from college, and all the people that you see on television the same way. What I would say is it doesn't matter until it matters. And if it is something you're interested, continue to pursue on a part-time basis. Not just about the degree, but the things that you will learn that will be helpful for you as your career grows and expands. So I'm not an anti-education advocate by any means. I'm pro-education, but in the absence of traditional university education, there are so many resources like Coursera, Google has a platform, AWS has a learning platform. Get as much free knowledge as you can acquire, or inexpensive knowledge. Please make sure and do so. And a good friend of mine, Chris Eller, just commented in the chat too. And he says he doesn't have a degree. He got into tech 24 years ago, first in SQL. He's self-taught, and we were just having dinner here in Chicago not long ago. And he says, while harder, he was determined to prove himself. He got a chance, and he worked very, very hard to do it. And I've known Chris, 30 years, and I would tell you, he's exactly right. Thanks, Chris, for your comments and your insight. It is, if you can do it, you will find opportunity. You just have to work. And even if you went to college, you have to work hard. So there's no shortcuts. There's no easy way. Whatever route that you take, there's going to be work, because there's competition. Yeah. Finding a new role. And then what Chris also commented is, now he trains himself daily to keep up with tech. And that's a good point, just universally. When you were talking about things moving and technology, when I talk to people about skill development and the acquisition of skills, I have a daughter who's a college student, and I would tell you, what I tell her is and she's studying data analytics, treat this like you treated volleyball, taekwondo, and basketball. You must practice when you're not at a game. This is not just about game time play. And it's a vocation different than most. So in other industries, you could read periodicals that come out in print, that come out once a month or once a week. Man, learning is a almost physical exercise in technology. It's moving so fast. And not just learning on your own. You kind of need a group of people who may be in the same or a little different. So you're playing the role of both student and mentee and mentor in this cycle, where you are learning from people who have more experience than you and people who have less, because they're learning all of just the new stuff, none of the old stuff, right? And so there's opportunities to continue to learn. So in brief, continue to build your network, continue to build your skill set, continue to practice, and continue to network with people who can get you connected to opportunities. And coming today was a good idea. So I hope that, Scott, if you're looking, that post in your comment that if you're looking for work today, please do. We have a number of people from different companies across the country in talent acquisition who are hiring. And for those who may have missed that request earlier in the broadcast, if you are hiring, please chat hiring so the folks who are looking can get connected with you. I want to go to Maynard's question next. Maynard's question is, thank you for your question, Maynard. If a contractor were to work multiple projects in succession, upskilling, how would you suggest leveraging that on your resume? Because some hiring managers view contractors as job hoppers, and there is a way to do that. So, and I've seen that with hiring managers and had to explain it. Typically, most engineering managers and directors, they know it when they see it. But let's talk about it because sometimes there's someone who's not the hiring manager doing the pre-screen.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant question. I like it. Because the presentation is everything, right? Perception is reality when it comes down to it. And so being able to take a look at your resume writing, or more importantly, your skill sets, right? And how you're communicating those is you can, a brilliant individual that has a lot of experience can communicate that ability to do that work one particular way. Or if they communicate it a totally different way, we've all seen poorly written resumes, from very brilliant people. And kind of the usual thing is, the more highly skilled you are on the tech side, the more you kind of disregard the writing process of your resume, right? So we go through the process in our talent acquisition organization of actually coaching and helping people. We actually rewrite resumes for people. Anybody that comes into our system, our talent acquisition people rewrite their resume for it, talk to them and go, what did you really do? What did you really accomplish? And make sure that the resume is tailored towards the position they're going after. So definitely take advantage of that if you're jumping in. If you're a contractor with multiple projects, we usually recommend a couple different ways. If it's with the same contracting company, like if you did multiple different contracts within Blueprint, you would have full-time employment, but you worked on 3 different successive projects within a tenure of working at Blueprint. So your overall tenure looks like you worked there for 2 years, which you did. You just happen to actually work on 3 different projects. That's actually a real strength. It shows you have the ability to context switch, right? It shows you have the ability to actually go from start to finish and get something done, and then be moved on to a different project, which shows you have a real successful track record of delivery. So that's actually a really, really good thing to be able to show for anybody that's looking at it, because you have this consistent employment. If it ended up being 3 different successive contracts with 3 different agencies or companies, then you can actually phrase it a little bit differently in terms of you actually are kind of a pointed, I go from start to finish on a project and I got these deliverables done, and then I married up the next project to the next one, and I wanted another opportunity because I wanted to progress my career, right? And that's a very legit way of actually getting career advancement. Will, how do you guys take that phrase that on your end?
We have a similar approach. We recommend kind of packaging the group of contract experiences, labeling it, contractor staff augmentation expertise, and then kind of at some point, not everyone writes a cover letter anymore, or in your objective is highlight your ability to be flexible, adaptable in new environments, in new teams, to be a starter and a finisher, and talk about the soft skill team development that happens, maneuvering quickly, adapting to change. We find that using that language kind of in that summary description of what your contract work is helps a lot. And then also highlighting kind of in a resume that's more functional, and it may not necessarily be chronological, because you may have contract work for 3 or 4 years, and then maybe a W-2 role for a year, 2, 3, 4 years. And so where you can package together, I think the delivery is cleaner. It frames a better story, and then get in front of it at your point of introduction, as you describe, kind of people when that question that at some point someone's going to ask you in the interview process, tell me about yourself, say, and then make that a part of your story. I enjoy the diversity of work. Now you may have to pivot that if you are going into an old legacy tech company they're looking for someone who's going to steer the ship, not change things. But if you're going to a dynamic place, a dynamic company, and change is a part of what they're doing, innovation is a part of what they believe in, and they're actively engaging in that, that's a good fit for you. Because we find that people who are successful on the contractor side, that they do enjoy doing new things and learning new things. And I would think in this day, now and forward, that will be more valuable than I think it has been in the past.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing I would say is legacy companies. So when you take out the non-technical companies that are the top 250 of the Fortune 500, 5 years from now, they probably will not have fully integrated with artificial intelligence. And so if those are the spaces that you want to work, know that being a laggard as an entity could also make you a laggard as a candidate. So if you work for, and I'll give you a short story. There's a guy that we were working with who had over 20 years of technology experience. He worked for one of the top 5 insurance companies in the globe, and they went through a digital transformation. And unfortunately, when those things happen, some of those folks who had some roles, they no longer fit into the new organization and adjusting and adapting. And we met him. He was almost unemployable because the technology that he used was really no longer being used at scale. And the people who were doing it were the sole survivors of the transitions that companies were going through. And so we worked with him about like a massive retool and kind of a career plan forward that he had to invest in for probably not quite a year, like 9 months, to get himself back up to scale, and then operating and getting to a place where he could find a new role in a new company. But he couldn't go from kind of an old tech company to a high tech company. There's kind of levels. Not everyone is a super laggard. Some are just a slow follower, which can look different. So, and those are also important things to consider when you're looking for a new role, because many of the folks who are from underserved communities have worked for laggard technology companies. The big, high-flying, fast-growth, hyper-growth technology companies, you'll notice if you look at their diversity reports, and we look at them all the time, and not to throw too much data out there, but they really haven't had any elevation or diversity from underserved communities in real percentage numbers. So if they were 2% of their employees 10 years ago, they're still 2% of their employee base. And so know that's going to be common, but the best defense for a great career is continue to stay skilled. And then there's a couple highlights. I just want to highlight some folks have left some links and some comments on Coursera. There's one here I think that's worth looking at. It's a prompt engineering course. Thank you for that. And Greta, she talked about the ProSci Leader Prompt Engineering course. Thank you for that. And Chris, just highlighting Chris's last comment also, was he talked about that he may spend almost an hour a day just on learning and growing to stay relevant. And here's a guy who's crazy smart, self-taught. And when I worked with him, he was years ago, even when technology wasn't his job, he was solving a lot of technology problems around our offices when we worked together. And so there's a lot of really bright people, a lot of really smart people doing a lot of great things. And then I'm just going to highlight Ruthie, who came in the back end on my second request to let us know that she was hiring. Thank you. So we're getting close to our time to wrap. I want to thank Ryan for joining us today, Coffee Tech and Opportunity. If this is your first time attending, we love to have true conversations about technology and opportunity, career growth, and partnership. Again, if you and I haven't had a chance to talk in a while, and last time you saw me, I had a lot of hair. I just came back from vacation. Well, this is not.
Last time I was on, I had less hair.
Yeah, there you go. I do have one question for you before we go. We bring on lots of different people from different companies, CIOs, CTOs, head of HR, head of recruiting, to talk about the things that happen in the places of work. What question, knowing kind of the theme of our show, would you leave with me that I might ask my next guest on Coffee Tech and Opportunity?
Well, I actually I think probably one of the more important questions that was asked, we actually didn't address it,
Okay.
didn't get it, was in the chat,
Okay.
which is how do you actually, if you're from an underrepresented or underserved community and you get into a position like this, how do you actually integrate and become a leader while still maintaining your own identity? Which is a question that we can do an entire hour or probably an entire day on, because it's incredibly nuanced. So that's the one question I would love to hear from everybody to be able to weigh in on.
Yeah, I love it. And you know what? I think I won't close. I'll go a little over for that and just say everyone has the right to show up as himself at work. A key element of work is the work of finding the right work for you. And that's one of the great challenges for talented people, is trying to figure out what they want to do. Because for many of the folks who are on this show, they could be doing something else, and they've chosen what they're doing today. Who you work with, who you work for, are critical decisions, to both your work and your life. So not just the company. So a part of what we think is helpful is the origin of you finding that relationship. Do a little cyber stalking on the people that you're interviewing, not just their LinkedIn profile, but I know that there are companies that it's not great to know that they've gone to your Facebook page or your Instagram page, and you should be doing the same. And it's a good way to learn about them, and it's a good way to engage with people. And because they're usually showing some version of their better self in the interview process too, the same way you are as a candidate. And I think the questions that you ask, especially the more senior you become in your professional career, it's critical, because you needing to be you to execute the job at the level that you need to execute, because you're a force multiplier and the people that you hire, promote, and assign projects to. And so I think there is I forget the book title, know thyself, and to thyself be true. And that, because it's so hard to go to work and be someone else all day. And I get it. And because I'm not telling you to quit your job tomorrow because you don't like the way things are going, but know that you have to be able to engage people one-on-one when things aren't going the way that you want to, in a way that they can receive them. You can tell anyone anything, but you can't always tell them the way you want to say it. You want to be able to say it the way you want them to receive it. And the examples that I use that I find to be most effective in managing the tone and tenor of the message we're trying to get across. Think about what you want to get done. I'm a father of 3 children. What would you tell your children in the voice that you would use there? What would you tell your mom in the voice that you would use there? What would you tell your significant other in the voice that you would use there, in a public forum, likely where your priest or rabbi or preacher might be around? And if you can get that voice right, you can get the right message when there's points of conflict or struggle. And so, and then even ask the person you're speaking with, I'm struggling with this. I'm trying to find the best words to say it. Help me understand the best way to communicate with you. I feel like we're missing each other some way. I don't get up here, come to work every day to have a conflict. How do we get around it? And I think if you lead with asking questions or seeking to understand first, I think you'll make some headway. And granted, there are some conflicts that can't be resolved alone. And if you don't feel like you can't get it there, you have to sometimes elevate things within the organization. And I've never been one of those people that like to elevate behind people's back. And so, I try to tell people, hey, I'm trying to resolve this. I can't find a way forward. I think we need to bring someone else into our conversation. And I think it should be Jeff, who's your boss, right? And so then we can talk through it, because you need an advocate and an ally to know that something's going on. Because I promise you, if someone views you as a troubled employee, they've already told their boss, you're already on the radar. And so when you play offense, it demonstrates a tier of professional maturity that is respected, because some of the best ideas come out of conflict. But balancing that, choosing your battles. And the other thing I would say is mentorship is important. You need you can't be the smartest person that you know in your network. You've got to expand that. You can't be the most senior person that you know in your network. You have to expand that. And I would also tell you that in my experience too, that having some junior people who are really smart around you is super helpful. And junior just means years of experience, but it doesn't mean that they don't have great ideas, and they may be better at something that you should be better at, and you may surprise yourself by looking around at your other resources. So those are my thoughts. I couldn't let that one get by. Ryan, I took that question as one that maybe I should answer. So hopefully this was helpful. Thank you again, Ryan Neal, Blueprint Technologies. Thank you everyone who joined us live. If I could have been anywhere else, I would have still chosen to be here today with all of you. Thank you.
Reach out, connect on LinkedIn, reach out, connect.
Amen on that. Okay. Thanks everyone. I'm going to close out. I'm going to say goodbye to Ryan. Ryan, I want you to hang around for a little bit. And as we say goodbye and we go into this new year, 2025, there are challenges. So if you and I are not connected, let's get connected. If you're not following us on Black Tech Jobs, please do so. On LinkedIn, that's where the majority of our content gets produced. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Bye now.